And this should be pretty exciting because, Jacob Baugh, fellow card hoarder member, it's always, nice to see one of those guys in the future match area. But Dredge is not only my pick for, the deck to play at this event, but Jacob Baugh was also one of the original innovators on our team to really take some interest in this Dredge deck, and he put in a lot of the work. So, out of the team card hoarder members, Jacob, as a Dredge player, is definitely one to take note of when he's playing this deck.
Absolutely. So it looks like Jeff Hoogland is going to be on a mulligan to 6 here. Let's see if he can find a 6 that he is happy with.
And Jeff probably knows what he's up against. So I would assume that Jeff is likely to mulligan a 7-card hand just because he wants something that's a little bit better specifically against Dredge. He knows the matchup is going to be pretty fast. And Jeff doesn't have a lot of disruption for the graveyard, but he does have 2 scavenging uses, and he does have some good ways to find it with Chord of Calling.
He also has 2 collective brutality, which is going to be very good when you are on the play against the Dredge deck. Not so great on the draw unless you have a Birds of Paradise, but one of the ways that you can actually interact with this deck is by attacking cards like Collective or Cathartic Reunion in their hand before they get a chance to play it.
Yeah, while that's certainly true, the turn 1 Thoughtseize is way better than the turn 2 Collective Brutality. So there is a very big difference between a turn 1 and turn 2 discard spell when a lot of Jacob's good discard outlets are 1-drops like Insolent Neonate and Faithless Looting.
And it looks like Jeff is going to 5. So let's see if he can find a hand that he is deemed acceptable.
And what's a little tricky about this is, for Jeff at least, he doesn't actually have that much sideboard hate. He does have access to white, and a lot of times we'll see people play cards like Rest in Peace, but instead Jeff just has 2 surgical extractions. He might be able to get all the way up into a Slaughter Games, but for the most part, I think this is going to be a match that is going to favor Jacob quite a bit, especially considering the mulligan situation.
Now that may be true with the sideboard hate, but Jeff also has 3 copies of Ghostly Prison, which are surprisingly exceptional against the Dredge deck. They're trying to go wide, a lot of Bloodghast and Prize Amalgams, and generally aren't going to be generating a lot of mana. So if you can land some number of Ghostly Prisons, it will greatly slow the deck down to the point where Jeff might be able to pull off one of his combo kills.
Well, that's definitely true. You also can't ignore Jacob's ability to just loam and conflagrate, Jeff out of the game. So while Ghostly Prison is going to be useful, certainly if we see Jeff on the play with like a turn 1 Birds of Paradise, turn 2 Ghostly Prison, that would be pretty unbelievable, but we'll have to see. That said, there's also a good chance that anticipating some graveyard hate, Jacob Baugh will be bringing in cards like Nature's Claim, Golgari Charm, or Abrupt Decay, all of which are going to be pretty good against Ghostly Prison.
It looks like Jeff has found a 4 that he is happy with. Jacob is going to start off with a turn 1 Faithless Looting. Great start so far for the Dredge deck.
And we saw a real lopsided matchup last round, excuse me. And we may see something pretty lopsided here with Jeff on the draw and a mulligan to 4 in a matchup that I don't think is particularly great for him. This might end up being a slaughter.
All right, well, Jacob is going to discard a Bloodghast and a Prized Amalgam. Jeff is going to just play a Windswept Heath and pass the turn back. Let's see what Jacob can put together here.
And Jeff really needs to get a move on. He does have the potential to just gain infinite life and make it so that Jacob can't really kill him. Jeff also has the ability to combo out with Kiki-Chord, but cards like Conflagrate, which I had mentioned before, not only are they going to be able to go to Jeff's face, but one of the good things about this Dredge deck is it's not all plan A. It has some disruption, and Jacob Baugh can use a card like Conflagrate to kill multiple of Jeff's creatures.
So Jacob Baugh is just going to play a Copperline Gorge, give back his Bloodghast, trigger Prized Amalgam, and then cast Conflagrate for 0, just to put it in the graveyard, and then bring back his Prized Amalgam on his end step. Jeff will fall to 19 using his Windswept Heath. He's going to fetch out a Murmuring Bosk.
And Conflagrate is so great in this Dredge deck. It's honestly my favorite card in the deck because it acts as a discard outlet You can play it for 0 on turn 1, and then on turn 2, you can dump your hand, which is great for your game plan, while also fireballing your opponent's board for like 6 damage, spread out among any number of creatures that you want. Sometimes when you're against a deck like Affinity, or Infect, or Burn, where they're playing multiple creatures on the opening turns of the game, a turn 1 Conflagrate can really take the wind out of their sails while ramping you into your game plan.
All right, so Jacob is going to attack for 5 and knock Jeff down to 14. He will flash back that Conflagrate, discarding 4 cards to deal 4 more points of damage, knocking Jeff down to 10, and then play his Mountain, which is going to bring back a Prized Amalgam and a Bloodghast.
And what's also great about Conflagrate is if you get your opponent down to 10, your Bloodghasts then have haste. So even if Jeff is able to deal with these Bloodghasts with a removal spell, or they end up trading, whenever they come back, they're going to have haste and just be able to get right back into the red zone. And now Jeff looking down at a massive board from Jacob Baugh's side. Jacob can attack him for a full 10. Jeff is certainly in need of some options.
All right, well, Jeff is going to fetch down to 8 and then cast a Orzhov Pontiff, which is going to give all of Jacob's creatures -1/-1. Kill both of the Bloodghasts. Jacob is just going to draw a card and then unearth his Scourge Devil, which is a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, all of your creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn, and that is going to end the game. So Jacob Baugh is going to take a quick game 1 here against Jeff Hoogland, who mulliganed to 4 with his Kiki-Chord deck. Let's take a look at the sideboards and see what's going to happen. Jacob Baugh has 3 Ravenous Trap, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Collective Brutality, 1 Ancient Grudge, 1 Nod of the Bone, 1 Lightning Axe, and 1 Nature's Claim. How would you sideboard here if you were in Jacob's spot?
So Jacob has a lot of options. You can make an argument for you can make an argument for every card except the 3 Ravenous Traps and the 1 Ancient Grudge. I think the cards that are going to be the best are going to be the 2 Golgari Charms, because they can be used against disruptive cards like Rest in Peace, as well as removal spell against a lot of Jeff's powerful draws. He has a lot of X1 creatures. Collective Brutality for a similar reason. And then also Nature's Claim, I think, is going to be one of the other standout cards. But Abrupt Decays, Nod of the Bone are also cards that you could just see sort of come in along with Thoughtseize.
I think we also might see him bring in Lightning Axe as just another way to answer Scavenging Ooze.
Yep.
He's probably anticipating quite a few of those from Jeff. Now on Jeff's side, we have 3 Ghostly Prison, 2 Blessed Alliance, 2 Slaughter Games, 2 Stony Silence, 2 Surgical Extraction, 1 Eidolon of Rhetoric, 1 Engineered Explosives, 1 Fulminator Mage, and 1 Reclamation Sage. How do you think Jeff is going to sideboard?
So the cards that I like in the matchup are the 2 Surgical Extractions are the real standouts. The 3 Ghostly Prisons are going to have some good use also. And then I think Engineered Explosives is also likely to come in. He could bring in the 2 Slaughter Games. I'm not really in love with it, but depending on how much room Jeff has to bring cards in, it's certainly something that he could consider, along with Blessed Alliance. Also not a particularly standout card, but if he just feels like he needs a removal spell to buy a little more time, gain a little bit of life, it has some utility, but again, it depends on how much Jeff wants to take out.
That makes sense. This is quite a dynamic matchup. Dredge, in particular, is quite a dynamic deck. And you know what other format you can play Dredge in?
Tell me.
Is Legacy. And
Ooh.
coming up here, we have Grand Prix Louisville, which will be Legacy, January 6th through the 8th. Hashtag GP Louisville on social media. StarCityGames.com/GP Louisville is the event site. For the Legacy main event, if you register by December 9th, you can receive this exclusive Lotus Petal playmat using the art from the Kaladesh Masterpiece Series Invention, Lotus Petal, and you can get that Progenitus Grand Prix promo.
Rumor has it, if you play this event with that playmat, you're likely to mulligan 50% less.
That's not guaranteed. Please don't quote us on that. Also, at the Infinite Challenge 3-day badge, $100. You get the playmat and the promo and that Infinite Challenge badge where you can play in all of the challenges over the course of 3 days. I don't have the exact numbers for them, but there are a lot of challenges that you can play in, and it is a great value. I know a lot of people that are going to the tournament might not be interested in playing in Legacy because some of the cards are expensive, but you do have a standard and a modern deck, and you can play in those infinite challenges. Or you can just get a one-day badge for $40. The schedule for all of the challenges is on the website, starcitygames.com/GP Louisville. Also, you can even get the Ultimate Commander for $40. You get a Commander versus playmat, you get an Ultimate Guard Commander, Flip and Tray, Xenoskin, deck case, 100 plus, and 4 Commander 4-player event vouchers. Pretty good value, pretty great deal. You even have a couple special guests.
Yeah, you've got Rob Alexander, who's done Underground Sea, one of the hallmark cards, quite frankly, of all Magic's history. And then also you have Christine Sprankle doing some really sweet cosplays. So a lot of fun things to see, whether you want to play or just meet awesome people who do cool stuff.
Again, that is Grand Prix Louisville Legacy, January 6th through the 8th. StarCityGames.com/GP Louisville. Make sure that you register early so you can guarantee that you get one of those exclusive Lotus Petal playmats and that sweet Progenitus Grand Prix promo.
Yeah, very cool. So in this next game, because Jeff is on the play, I'm really looking for him to have a powerful start. I would love for him to start with something like a Birds of Paradise to ramp up his mana. He has some really powerful things that we can do in this that he can do in this matchup that we didn't really get to see in game 1 because he mulliganed to 4. He does have some cards that specifically will overperform, like Scavenging Ooze, so I could see him wanting to mulligan to those cards, but because he's on the play, I think that he doesn't need to mulligan quite as aggressively because when he's on the play, his just normal game plan is going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Dredge game plan a little bit more easily.
Also, some of those overperformers are creatures, and with this deck having 4 copies of Court of Calling, there are some hands that he'll be able to keep that might not have those impactful creatures, but there are ways that he can find them fairly quickly into the game.
Right. And just as like a general, kind of game philosophy sort of thing, when you're on, like if you're against a deck that's of a similar speed, when you're on the play, you're likely to want more of your threats, and when you're on the draw, you want a little more disruption.
So Jacob Baugh is going to lead off here with a Thoughtseize off a Blackleaf Cliffs. That's going to reveal a hand. Collective Brutality, Orzhov Pontiff, Path to Exile, Restoration Angel, and a Plains, along with the Wooded Foothills that Jeff Hoogland used to find an Overgrown Tomb, and a Birds of Paradise. So 2 lands, Birds, Resto Angel, Pontiff, Path to Exile, Collective Brutality. It's not a bad opening 7.
Yeah, pretty good. Particularly, I like the combination of the Orzhov Pontiff and the Restoration Angel because Jacob Baugh has a lot of X1 creatures in his deck, and that's going to be a good way for Jeff Hoogland to deal with them. So I think Jacob is trying to decide between those creatures. I kind of like taking the Path to Exile because it's the only permanent answer to something. That said, you can make a good argument for basically all of these cards, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see what Jacob decides to take.
Looks like Jacob is going to get rid of the Restoration Angel. He will fall down to 18 from the secondary effect on Thoughtseize. Pass the turn back to Jeff Hoogland. Jeff's going to draw his card and cast Collective Brutality. It's going to let him look at Jacob's hand and take an instant or sorcery. So Jacob's hand is 2 Mana Confluence, Conflagrate. It's like an instant neonate, and then he also has
and they have drifted into the void of the glare. Now we can no longer see them.
Now he has a Cathartic Reunion and a Faithless Looting.
Yeah, and I like Jeff taking basically the enablers. Cathartic Reunion is generally the more powerful card in the Dredge deck, but I think if in Jeff's seat, the reason he's giving so much thought to potentially taking Faithless Looting is because Cathartic Reunion makes you discard the cards before you draw them, and so because Jacob doesn't have any Dredgers as of yet, the Faithless Looting is the card that's going to be better at putting Dredgers in the graveyard, whereas Cathartic Reunion is likely going to mean that those Dredgers are just in Jacob's hand. So if I was Jeff, I think that I would take the Faithless Looting, even though it's generally thought of as the weaker card in this deck.
Yeah, I think that Reunion is definitely a more velocity-based card. Has a lot more potential when things are going well. But as you talked through the decisions, looks like Jeff came to the same conclusion and took the Faithless Looting.
And so now Jacob really wants to just draw like a Golgari Grave Troll. Can he do it?
Looks like he picked up a Prized Amalgam. We may just see a Conflagrate for 0 and an Insolent Neonate this turn from Jacob.
Yeah, that would definitely be a good play. He's got to worry a little bit about a potential Scavenging Ooze. It may be worth it for Jacob to, because he has a third land, wait on the Conflagrate so that he can play Conflagrate for 0 and flash it back on the same turn. That would mean that a Scavenging Ooze would not be able to disrupt it. He has good information about Jeff's hand, so he knows that Jeff would have to draw it off the top. So it's a pretty minor detail.
So looks like Jacob is just going to cast Cathartic Reunion, discarding Conflagrate and a Prized Amalgam. He's just going to pick up 3 cards and pass the turn back to Jeff Hoogland. He does fall to 17 because of Mana Confluence.
Oh, that doesn't matter. Come on, it's Mana Confluence. So we'll see what Jeff can do here. Both players are not really enacting their game 1 plan per se, but hopefully they can do so on these subsequent turns, because both of these decks are not going to win by disrupting each other. They're going to be win by basically doing their thing with a little bit of disruption to slow the opponent down.
Jeff is just going to play a Plains and pass the turn back to Jacob with 4 mana available. Maybe he picked up another copy of Restoration Angel. Jacob will draw for his turn. He's going to lead off with an Insolent Neonate. He's going to start. He'll sacrifice the Neonate, discard Golgari Grave Troll, and dredge it back. Looks like there's a Narcomoeba, a Drakmar Salvage, and
this is looking to be a pretty good hit. 2 Narcomoebas and the Prized Amalgam in the graveyard mean that Jacob's going to be able to get a little bit of velocity and at least use 1/2 of that Orzhov Pontiff.
So there are the 2 Narcomoebas that will enter the battlefield. It will trigger the Prized Amalgam that's in Jacob's graveyard.
And Jacob has a lot of options from this point. He's got now 2 Faithless Lootings in the graveyard that he can flash back for 3 mana. He's got that Conflagrate that he can flash back as well. So if Jeff doesn't have a way to interact with Jacob's graveyard, this Orzhov Pontiff is basically just going to be a Band-Aid on the problem, and Jacob is going to be able to continually reload over and over again and generate more and more velocity.
Jake is going to cast Faithless Looting. Looks like he's just going to draw 1 card and 2 cards. And then discard 2 Golgari Grave Trolls for his turn.
And Jeff really needs to find something like a Surgical Extraction or a Scavenging Ooze real fast, because Jacob is going to start exploding onto the board. And so long as Jacob doesn't forget, all right, he doesn't forget his Prized Amalgam trigger, perfect. Prized Amalgam's a little weird because it triggers early in the turn, but it doesn't come into play until your end step.
Yeah, it is a delayed trigger. Interestingly enough, Jeff is going to pat to exile the Prized Amalgam, but interestingly enough, the Prized Amalgam trigger is one of those unique triggers that, since it's changing zones, you can't really miss it. So in an instance that you happen to miss your Prized Amalgam trigger, don't just blow it off as, oh, I missed my trigger. Call a judge so they can resolve the issue, because when a card is supposed to change zones, they are handled a little differently in the realm of missed triggers than just a normal muster may trigger.
Yep. So Jeff has this Orzhov Pontiff, and I think if I were him, I would probably hold it back. Oh wow, and he's got the Scavenging Ooze, so this is huge. So now he needs to decide what he wants to target. He can target the 2 Golgari Grave Trolls to help slow Jacob's Dredge engine down. He could also try to go after the Conflagrate so that Jacob can't potentially wipe his board. If Jeff decides to eat the 2 Golgari Grave Trolls, it'll bump his Scavenging Ooze up to a 4/4, but with a card drawn, Jacob will be able to Conflagrate that Scavenging Ooze for 4. So I like the fact that Jeff is going after the Conflagrate right away. What's also good about this is if Jacob ends up dredging a Golgari Grave Troll and hitting another Conflagrate, Jeff is going to have an opportunity at the end of Jacob's draw step to exile that Conflagrate that has recently been dredged, so that it can't be cast.
All right, well, this is a good dredge. It hit 2 Prized Amalgams and a Bloodghast, but Jeff is going to be able to take care of that Bloodghast.
And this is one of the defining things about Scavenging Ooze in Jeff Hoogland's deck rather than a deck like Jund. The presence of Birds of Paradise means that you just have more green mana, and Jeff is playing a green-based deck. A lot of times, if an opponent only has one Scavenging Ooze, the Dredge deck can actually just overpower it. And so you need a lot of green mana to go with your Scavenging Ooze to properly fight it. It looks like at this state in the game, Jacob is probably going to be able to overpower the Scavenging Ooze, but we'll see.
So it looks like he's going to flash back a Faithless Looting. The first dredge is going to be a Golgari Grave Troll. There's another Prized Amalgam. He's searching for a Bloodghast or a Narcomoeba here to trigger the 3 Prized Amalgams.
So one thing that I think I would dredge next is probably the Life from the Loam, because one of the good things that you can do with this deck is just start loaming a bunch of lands, and then even if the Scavenging Ooze gets kind of big, you're still going to be able to conflagrate it.
All right, well, there is another Bloodghast, so he will be able to discard a couple Grave Trolls here. Or maybe he'll just discard some of the Narcomoebas that's in his hand, since he'll be able to start playing the Grave Trolls next turn. But what this second Bloodghast means is that he's going to have 2 triggers from the land that he plays, and while Jeff can get rid of one of them with his Scavenging Ooze, he can't get rid of the other, and then that's going to trigger all 3 of the Prized Amalgams that's in his graveyard.
Yeah, and the Prized Amalgams being 3/3s is kind of a big game. Jeff is likely going to need to make his Scavenging Ooze into a 4/4. Otherwise, he's going to have to worry about them just attacking and killing him. One thing that's going to help Jeff quite a bit is the fact that he still has that Orzhov Pontiff. So it's going to be, that is going to be able to deal with all of Jacob's 1 toughness creatures. But Jeff is still going to have to contend with the fact that he's need a little bit more mana. He would really like to be able to play his Orzhov Pontiff and exile a bunch of stuff from Jacob's graveyard, but he really wants just more mana, basically.
Jacob is going to Life from the Loam, target Gemstone Mine, Copperline Gorge, and a Mana Confluence. His 2 Bloodghast did come back. Jeff is going to eat one of the Prized Amalgams. See if Jacob is going to attack with those Narcomoebas.
I definitely like an attack with the Narcomoeba. I think that would be a good play.
Looks like he is not going to attack with the Narcomoeba. He's just going to get his 2 Prized Amalgams.
Perhaps a missed opportunity, or he may just be intending to block.
And this Pontiff is going to be real juicy.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty good, but again, it's only a temporary solution. It's basically just buying time for the Scavenging Ooze. It may even be worth it to not play the Pontiff, just so that you can exile more stuff from Jacob's graveyard. I kind of like the idea of maybe holding the Pontiff off for another turn and just basically trying to shut down Jacob's Dredge engine. Because as it stands now, all you have to do is exile 1 more creature with that Scavenging Ooze, and then Jacob's attacks aren't really that great. And granted, he can continually reload, but Jeff is going to be slowly start weathering him down, and Jeff is going to be able to gain some life too. So even if his life total dips, he'll probably be able to keep it high enough so that he doesn't have to worry about getting conflagrated out of the game.
Jeff is going to go with the Pontiff.
And so I think the defining factor in Jeff playing the Pontiff here is it looks like he drew another Restoration Angel. And so I think he's sort of looking at this and saying, well, I'm going to be able to get multiple Pontiff triggers, so I may be able to just, you know, get close to even running Jacob out of a deck.
Now we are in the range here where Jacob can just start casting Golgari Grave Troll, and it's going to be fairly
huge, monstrous. Yeah, that's one of the secret modes with the Dredge deck is a lot of people think of it as this early aggressive deck that kind of runs out of steam later on. But quite frankly, Golgari Grave Troll in particular, I've played this card and it's been like a 20/20, you know?
Yeah.
It's just kind of an unreal card. And the fact that you can regenerate it means that it's a very persistent threat as well.
Ooh, and he hit 2 Conflagrate off of that dredge.
And that is huge. That is likely going to be the nail in the coffin for this game. There's a very good chance that, especially with Life from the Loam, Jacob Baugh is going to be able to flash back one of those Conflagrates, discard a bunch of cards from his hand, and potentially wipe Jeff's entire board. And this is why I love Conflagrate in this deck so much, is it not only like helps enable your dredge engine by being a discard outlet, but it just bonfire the dams your entire board from that your opponent has.
Yep. One of the big reasons that this deck has switched over to Life from the Loam, rather than you trying to utilize something like Bridge from Below or Greater Gargadon, is that just like the Loam plus Conflagrate plan in the late game is just so much better than almost anything else.
Yeah, it really gives the deck a lot more play than a lot of people realize, because you do have a fair amount of interaction. Instead of needing 3 removal spells, Jacob just needs 1 that kills 3 creatures.
All right, so he's going to flashback Conflagrate for 6, 4 damage on the Scavenging Ooze, 1 damage on Birds of Paradise, 1 damage on Orzhov Pontiff.
And it seems like Jacob may be thinking about everything. The one good reason to put 6 damage on the Scavenging Ooze rather than putting any damage on Jeff is Jeff could potentially bump the Scavenging Ooze up to a 4/4 and then maybe have something like Mutagenic Growth. You know, it's pretty unlikely, but I think Jacob's just trying to think of everything and just wants to make sure that that Scavenging Ooze is dead no matter what, and feels like the extra 2 damage on Jeff Hoogland is more or less irrelevant, because Jacob is going to start swinging for huge amounts of damage.
All right, so it looks like Jeff is going to eat the other Conflagrate. With the Scavenging Ooze, he's going to haunt onto a Prized Amalgam. Jacob is going to attack for 6 and knock Jeff down to 11.
And I believe Jacob, if he wanted, could even flash back another Faithless Looting. He has the mana. I'm not 100% sure if there's one in his graveyard.
It definitely looks like there was one. Jeff and Jacob counted his library, and I want to say it was in the 12 to 13 range.
Yeah. I know a lot of times
But
with this dredge deck,
anyway.
I have been a little worried about decking myself. A lot of times I will end the game with only 6 or 7 cards left in my library, and I've gotten to a point where I have enough on the board and I'm just naturally drawing because I can't really afford to dredge anymore.
All right, well, he's going to dredge 2.
I kind of like dredging the Dark Blast here. It's a nice interactive spell that Jacob can have in his hand. And
oh yeah,
it was just discard, of course.
All right, so looks like Jeff has a Firelit Thicket and a pass of the turn. Let's see how Jacob wants to dredge.
So here, I would like to dredge either the Life for the Loam or the Dakmor Salvage. Oh, he's got plenty of cards. He's fine.
Looks like there's 14.
Yeah. So I like...
Maybe we just do a Grave Troll and cast it?
I like doing the Loam because you can get some land drops, get the Bloodghasts out of your graveyard, and if that second Conflagrate is still hanging around in the graveyard, which I'm...
Yeah, it was exiled with
it was exiled with Ooze. Okay, thanks.
All right, we're just going to attack with our Prized Amalgams. Jeff does have a Restoration Angel. He will block one of the Prized Amalgams.
And here a Dark Blast would be great.
Jeff will Life from the Loam. Or Jacob's going to Loam, getting back Copperline Gorge.
And I kind of would have liked to have seen a flashback Faithless Looting to get back the Dark Blast and then cast it. He wouldn't be able to cast Loam this turn, but he has enough mana to do so, and that would take care of that Restoration Angel.
Well, it would take care of the Restoration Angel, but by playing a land here, he's going to get back at least 1 Bloodghast and the other... Oh, he can actually do it all.
Oh, he can do it all.
There's the Dark Blast.
Oh, of course, because he gets a land drop.
And then draw a card. And we'll let him discard a couple of cards, couple of lands.
And so this is going to be a great turn for Jacob Baugh. He's going to be able to build his board, answer Jeff's flash threat, and basically the way is going to be clear for Jacob to win, potentially on the upcoming turn.
So we'll get back 2 Blood Gas. Trigger the Amalgam, Dark Blast the Restoration Angel.
And this is why Dredge is such a sweet deck. It just gets to do all kinds of stuff. It's a deck that has a lot of lines of play. You can interact with your opponent. You can play a very explosive style of game, or you can play an attrition-based game. There's a lot of flexibility in the Dredge deck. Granted, it gets hated out pretty hard by specific cards like Rest in Peace, but the Dredge deck is well-rounded in my mind enough to even fight through 1 or 2 hate cards. I mean, we saw it easily fight through a Scavenging Ooze this game.
I mean, even against Rest in Peace, you can always just play your creatures and attack.
Yeah.
Mana Confluence does it all. Just ties the room together. Gives you blue mana.
I
Gives you your
do
double
love me a
black.
Mana Confluence.
All right, well, Collective Brutality is going to drain Jacob Baugh for 2, and Birds of Paradise is going to be on chump duty. So Jacob currently has 7 cards in his library. There's
wow.
the Scourge Devil.
The Scourge Devil is, I feel like that's Jacob Baugh's invitational card. We had a lot of conversations about whether or not it was cuttable, and Jacob was always like, well, there's all these situations, but if you just get Scourge Devil, you just win.